Okay, so we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone. Looks like a decent-sized crowd today, I think. There was a few people that were unable to get in, so this building has a pretty strict policy, and we try to close the guest list 24 hours in advance because we need to get them the guest list. So just FYI for future events that happen in this building, please make sure you RSVP, otherwise you will be turned away, unfortunately. A couple of people had to get turned away because they couldn't get added to the list at the last minute. Okay, so just real quick, we try to do this at the start of each event. How many people is this your first org for? Can you raise your hands a little higher, please? Okay, so like six or seven. How many of you came from the Slack meetup? How many of you got an email that are part of the Slack meetup? We kind of tried to cross-post it across a couple of meetups. Nobody? Okay. Useful to know for our marketing methods that didn't quite work. Okay, so we have two talks planned out for tonight. The first talk is going to be around Slack integrations. We're going to have user stories from two of us today. There were going to be three of us, but unfortunately, one of us had to. He ended up, Mike Solomon, who many of you know, he ended up going to urgent care, and he's dealing with some stuff that he couldn't make it tonight. So we've been going back and forth via email today. So so we wish him the best. He'll be with us in spirit today. He's fine, but he can't make it tonight, and he needs to undergo something. So so we'll talk a little bit about his content. We have the content there. I'll talk I'll speak. Kapil and I will do our best to try to speak to the best of that, but some of that personal knowledge will be lost with Mike there. So, and then the second talk is from Blended Perspectives. They're going to be talking about some planning methods using Atlassian tools and various other additional tool sets that you could use there. They came all the way from Toronto, so welcome, Miles and Josh from Blended Perspectives. We'll try to keep them prompt. There's a short break in between, just so that you can grab a beer or take a quick bathroom break, just as we do the switchover. But we start pretty promptly, so we'll try to keep things on time there. Just one other thing, Sean Regan is an Atlassian. He's visiting from San Francisco. If he's part of the cloud team, so if anybody wants to chat with him during the networking session, feel free to pull him aside. Sean, I don't know if you want to say one or two words.
Yeah, thanks for everybody for being part of the community and coming out. It's awesome when I go to an OG and I see people teaching everyone else how they use our products successfully and how they're helping their teams get stuff done. It's pretty inspiring. I purposely kind of jumped into the place where our biggest customers are, where compliance, where security, where deeply entrenched workflows exist, because I know there's a ton of questions on cloud. Can I use it? When the changes roll to server and things like that. So I figured I'd just make myself available while I'm in town. You can hit me up with the questions. If I can get you an answer here, I will. If not, I'll follow up. But that's an exciting part of our business in that it's pushing the envelope on how Jira is used, what the UI and UX looks like. But it's also part of the business that for folks that have Jira in place, right? It's not a transition that you make overnight. So I thought I'd make myself available for that. And for any folks that fit into a 2XL sweatshirt, we've got 2 bonus Bitbucket hoodies tonight that came with me in the laptop bag. So enjoy.
Yeah, so on that note, if you are not a partner, you should have also received a raffle ticket. You should know you're not a partner because you don't provide services for Atlassian, and you should have either a green name tag or a blue name tag. Partners have red name tags. We have a drawing later on at the end of the night just for being present. There's a couple of door prizes. So in addition to the hard sell that he had on the Bitbucket hoodies, we also have a Bluetooth speaker, and we have a smart camera that you can install anywhere in your house and spy on people or whatever it is you do with those things. Blended Perspectives will also talk a little bit about they have some giveaways, some items that they'll make available. Miles will talk about that as part of his presentation. So plenty of stuff for everybody here. Two more things. These events aren't possible without sponsorship. We're volunteers as leaders here. The funding comes primarily from Atlassian, but also is supplemented by a lot of our partner sponsorship. So first of all, in addition to Atlassian sponsoring us and providing some resources, Schoology is sponsoring us for the event space here. This is a pretty sweet spot for those of you that have been here for the first time. They make it available to us. They kind of bend over backwards and make us feel really welcome. So thank you to Alberto and the Schoology team for making us welcome here. Alberto is somewhere over there. Thank you. We also have today's sponsors are, we have Column. Yep. Column is sponsoring us. They've been sponsoring us every event. So has AdTech. The sushi that AdTech primarily sponsors the sushi. So every event we have sushi because of AdTech. Ecor is sponsoring us. And we also have Atlas Authority sponsoring us today. So things like door prizes, a lot of the food and drinks that you're eating, many of those things are provided through those sponsorship and wouldn't otherwise be possible. We'll be presenting our user speakers with some prizes from Atlas Authority, just as to remind you and to encourage users, non-partners to actually speak. Whoever speaks is eligible for an Echo Dot or a Google Home Mini, just for being presenting to this group overall. So hopefully that's some incentive to encourage more user participation there. And then the last thing that I'll mention is we have a looping deck here that will stop when we do the presentation, but we'll start it up again afterwards. There's lots of information on this looping deck. If anybody's looking for a job, we also post job openings on here that we know about in the space. So take a look at those job openings. There's information here about discounts to the upcoming summit. There's $600 off for the early bird special, or whatever the earliest bird special is. So it's $600 off of list price right now. So by using a code that's up there. And yeah, I think we have some information on our upcoming events too. So take a look at that looping deck if you're interested in any of that stuff. Okay, we'll get started then. The first presentation that we're going to have is the Slack presentation. Kapil and I are going to talk through it, and I'll just give me a minute while I start up this. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, Mike Solomon was going to be the third talker, the third speaker. He's not going to be able to make it with us tonight, but we'll cover some of his slides as best as we can. Don't worry about taking pictures. We post photos and slide decks on our event page immediately after the event, so just concentrate on the questions and the content. Okay, so here's the objective. This idea came up from, actually Mike brought up this idea. Mike approached us and said, hey, because we had a Slack, we talked about the Slack partnership with Atlassian a couple of events ago, and a bunch of us raised our hands up about being Slack users and having integrations. And so we were like, hey, why don't we get together and talk to the group about what integrations we built up for Slack. So the objective of this is primarily just to share our user experiences about solving some business problems and inspire you to let you know, hey, if I can do it, you could probably do it. There's plenty of capabilities out there. There's plenty of people who've solved problems and several solutions out there, even if you don't consider the solutions we've used. And we'll also try to highlight some of the differences. So Kapil and I have we've solved business problems in different ways at times, and so it's just evidence that there's many ways to skin a cat. Just who we are. So Mike is the VP of People Ops at Group 9 Media. we didn't get him to fill out his responsible for. So I think he's responsible for people operations and stuff. So that was my ad lib there. I work at a company called JSTOR. I am responsible. I'm the head of the business systems group there. I am primarily responsible for strategy and execution of work related to internal business systems, productivity tools, collaboration tools, and we do software engineering, we do product management, production support, systems engineering. That we have various functions within those groups that have services that we provide to staff internally.
Well, hello and welcome everyone. So I'm Kapil. I'm Director of Technology at company NYC-ACE. It's a media company based off of New York. I work there on multiple systems. So I'm primarily responsible for like all the admin development, production support, and quality assurance. So I deal with like different systems, and we'll talk about it, like what challenges we face. But one of the major challenges I particularly face for team and the company is because we have so many tools which we use, and we have to support them using a better way and faster. So, yeah.
Yeah. So this is kind of how we're going to approach this evening. We've just covered an intro. We're going to talk to you about a couple of common business problems, and we'll talk to you about how we individually or in our organizations address those problems. And we'll also present to you like other things that we considered. So there's plenty of solutions out there that we don't use right now, but that are available. And we're not even covering all of it. There's plenty of other things out there. So this is it's primarily, again, if you're running into the same business problems, these are ways that we'll provide you with some information that you can consider as part of the evaluation process of whatever solution you're looking at. If time permits, we had extra content here. I don't know if time will permit. We'll see. We'll prioritize the questions, but if time permits, we'll cover some additional scenarios. We're going to talk about 4 business problems in the main area, and then there's other business problems that we can talk about if time permits. So common problems. There's, we all face some sort of business problems, and we try to figure out some ways around them. There'll be an overarching theme as we go through these business problems, at least from our perspective. We are heavy Slack users. Our users live in Slack, and so the primary goal is to try to reach those users where they are. So we try to surface, like with all of the business problems, you'll see that it's about surfacing information and meeting users where they live. So surfacing information in Slack from key systems, and then allowing users to act either on that information or on other key systems from where they live. So we talk about bidirectional kind of functionality there, and those are the 4 different problems we'll refer to. So problem number 1. So there's work that should be captured in Jira as an issue, but for whatever reason, it's that a Jira issue is never created, right? So how many times have you guys sat in a Slack channel and you get the, hey, do you have a sec? Like, can you do me a favor? Like, can you do this thing over here? We work in an agile fashion, and all of our work needs to be represented in sprints. And we try to plan out 2 weeks in advance, and we'll try to deal with production issues that come up. And when unplanned work comes up that causes sprint goals to not be met and like your sprints to balloon and stuff like that. So we try to track all of our work in Jira wherever possible. And so the main thing here is we get lots of those Slack messages. We don't want to discourage people from Slacking us, but we want to make it as easy as possible to create issues when those Slack messages come in so that we can track that work in Jira. So this is primarily thinking about performing some actions from Slack onto Jira right now. That's the main business problem we're thinking about here. So how do we address it? So as I mentioned, we allow people to create issues directly from Slack. And these are the main benefits we see. We want to minimize the effort that it takes to create an issue. Without an integration like this, we have to copy and paste somebody's message, go into Jira, fill in a summary, a description, assign all of those types of things. And it's context switching that's expensive. We want to capture all the work in Jira, and we want to avoid dropping the ball. Slack has cool features like reminders and things like that that will kind of ping you if somebody sends you an important message, but we want to, as soon as that message comes, and generate a ticket as soon as we determine it's worked for us. So there's a couple of different ways we addressed it. So we address it in different ways here. So Mike was going to talk about a slash command. All of Mike's tools, they follow a similar architecture. They're Node.js apps, custom Node.js apps specific for the use case that they have, and they're set up in Heroku right now. And so whereas Kapil's and ours, we have slightly different solutions. They're not as standard as Mike's are. So the custom Node.js app on Heroku, that as we talk about Mike's use cases, that's his solution there. If anybody's interested in the technical details of that, I won't be able to cover that. I'll cover this at a very, very superficial level in terms of functionality, but I can make an introduction to Mike if anybody's interested, so come speak to me, and once Mike is feeling better, we'll get an introduction going. I've set things up in my organization using Zapier, and Kapil has set it up using Workato. Again, these are 3 different solutions. There's many solutions. We'll cover several of them, but these are how we chose to address it. So I realize this is a small GIF, and you could probably see it a little bit more when you download it, when you download the presentation later. But essentially, Mike has set up 2 different GIFs over here, and he's showing you his use of creating a Jira using a slash command. So I don't know the exact terminology he uses. Maybe it's slash Jira create ticket, and takes a specific piece of information from Slack, and it allows him to generate a ticket by filling out specific fields there. These solutions are all very similar in terms of what you have to do in Slack in order to generate that ticket. You have to click something or write something, and it's going to ask you for additional information, and then it makes a call out to Jira. So that's Mike's solution, the slash command. This is the solution we have implemented. It's a Zapier solution. How many people are familiar with Zapier and Zaps? Okay. So it allows you to integrate multiple systems together via what are called Zaps. You set up some sort of rules that will allow you to connect those 2 systems together, and based on events and things like that, you can trigger changes in various tools. So what I'm doing over here is I'm clicking when somebody sends me a message. I click the ellipsis on the message, like the 3 dots at the end, and then there's a drop down that I can select from there that allows me to create a Jira ticket. And when I click that drop down, so I'm clicking the drop down that says create Jira ticket. It pops up this message over here. I choose the Jira project. I fill in a summary. I can fill in the reporter, but I have to fill in the actual details of the ticket. And what happens once I hit submit is a Jira ticket is then generated in my Jira instance. So that allows me, the same way that I would click on remind me about this message, I would just click create a Jira ticket. This is work that I know that we need to do. And the Workato solution, which is the solution that Kapil has set up.
Yeah, so with the Workato also, it's pretty same as like what Marlon explained is, it's an integration tool where you can connect your various applications and create recipes using work. So what we used in our solution is like we use the workbot, and we created some recipes to connect our Jira and Slack. So as you see here right now, whenever we need to create, or a user needs to create a ticket, they just simply go to Slack, the workbot, and I'll just start when it starts. So you just type a message that create a Jira ticket, and this is something I created with very basic just for the demo purpose. But that's like you can have like different workbots for project specific and the commands as per the project. So right now this is going to like our main Jira project. So all you do is like you ask to create a ticket, and it populates a form which you decide what all fields you want to show in that form, and that's how the information will go back to your Jira, and it will give you back the link of Jira where you click it and you get it. So it's pretty fast. And the building is, again, it's easy because you don't have to write any code or any scripting. It's pretty much you can just do configuration in Workato.
Yeah, and in Zapier it's the same. I didn't do any development on that. It was a simple setup. Like Zapier makes it pretty easy. With Zapier, there's actually a cheat. What we're actually doing is we're we have email enabled on Jira. And so when we fill out those fields, we're actually just generating an email that goes into a mailbox that Jira is pulling out of. I think I was speaking to somebody from Workato. Is anybody at least offline? Okay, we have Workato people here. If anybody's interested in Workato, they're two representatives there. Yeah. Okay. Feel free to grab them later on if you're interested in hearing more about this or what it's capable of. So there's plenty of other solutions to consider. So for those of you who are looking to solve this problem, there's pros and cons to all of these. I don't know all of the pros and cons. There's plenty of research that you might be able to do here, but the names that we hear about quite a bit are Next Up Jira. There's lots of talk about that. There's lots of functionality built into Next Up Jira. I also remember reading about Jirio when I was doing the research into this. Kapil, I think you've heard about the other two.
Yeah, that's another one where you can use just the configuration. Actually, I would say that it more depends which tool to pick. Depends on your need and your expertise. So some companies has their in-house expertise where they can build the tool or do the coding, so they can go for a different solution. However, if you don't have those expertise, you can go for easier solution like Zephyr or Workato. So that depends on that.
Yeah. Okay. So problem number 2. There's lots of events happening in Jira, all sorts of things happening in there if your Jira instances are anything like ours. And again, we want to meet the user where they are. So we want to send many of those key events from Jira to Slack. So how do we address it? There's a couple of slides in this business problem over here because we're talking about some very, very specific use cases. And we'll show a GIF or a screenshot for each one of them. So the most basic of it is just to receive channel notifications in Slack for key Jira issue events. I think we both use this. I'm a server user. Kapil is a cloud user. So we use different versions of this plugin, but it does what we need it to do. So Slack connector for Jira, it's available. Look at the marketplace, and you can. And there's several other applications or apps that we'll talk about there, but this is the one that we chose to use. This is, why don't you talk through this one?
True. So as mentioned, is like the Slack connector. That is what we used in our solution. So we can choose on what events you want to get notification in Slack. So as you see right now, I'm just covering for the issue creation. So whenever an issue creates, Slack notification goes to a specific channel. It gets the link of that issue and that, okay, somebody has created this issue, and we can always go and open that issue from right there. So that's what we use.
We use it in very, very similar ways, except I'm server, he's cloud. Another use case here is receiving Slack DMs when you're mentioned in a Jira comment. So a couple of these use cases, I think there are 3 of them. These were Mike's use cases. So these are the Node.js apps that he's built in Heroku. That I'm sure he'd be willing to share some of that information with others. But what he's showing over here is on the right-hand side, you'll see that he just entered a comment in a Jira issue and he mentioned somebody, and there's a Slack message that appears where it says this person mentioned you in this item over here. You get an email obviously when you're mentioned on a Jira ticket, but again, this is the idea of like, well, you have an Outlook mailbox or a Gmail inbox or something like that, but if you're spending most of your time in Slack, getting it surfaced in Slack is really important. So this one's very specific to Jira mentions. This next one over here is, I kind of alluded to this problem. So if you're a Scrum Master or a product owner or somebody that's part of like a cross-functional team over there and you work in sprints on a regular basis, I cannot stand when people try to put unplanned work like in our sprint, like we haven't gone through like a backlog grooming process. And so whenever anybody does something like that, we want to set up notifications so that the right people are notified about that, so that our sprint doesn't just go bananas and the engineers start working on something that hasn't been prioritized. Obviously, you can implement other processes in place to make sure that your engineers only work on specific types of tickets and no unplanned work is addressed and stuff like that. But this is just another way to kind of raise the alarm on when an issue has been added to an active sprint. So the GIF that Mike is showing over here is that they're grabbing an issue, dropping it into the active sprint, And as part of that, you'll see that there's, it says Jira Sprint Scope. That's the name of the app that comes up, the Node.js app. And it tells you that something has been added to the active sprint. You could have Scrum Masters or product owners just monitoring this channel. You could set up mentions there if you wanted, so that you call the right people's attention to that type of thing. But again, a very specific use case here. Another specific use case is when somebody modifies the fixed version. There's, in Mike's scenario, this isn't a big problem in our company, but in Mike's situation, he wants the right people to be alerted about that, so that they know which specific issues are related to which specific versions that they're dealing on. So when the fixed version changes, they want the right people notified. And again, it's the same sort of thing. An action is happening in Jira on the right-hand side. Somebody's modifying a release date up over here, and there's a notification that happens in Slack. These are various different apps that are running, but they do kind of some of the similar things. And then this is another example of like just getting reports of information that happens in Jira. Like, again, you can get an email with this type of information from Jira, but this is pulling that information up in Slack. So getting weekly reports for upcoming releases, so that those that are in charge of like communicating those, there's follow-up actions that happen from a release. They just get this extra notification point. So you'll see on a Monday at 10:30 a.m., there's a program management staff that get a notification about the version report for that week, and they then know what they need to do after that. Other solutions to consider. Again, this is taking information from Jira and pushing it out to Slack. So you'll see several of the same ideas here, or kind of solutions here. You'll see next up Jira, Stratios, which Kapil mentioned, Jirio, Bitband. Out of curiosity, does anybody use any other tools that they would recommend to audience members for pushing important information from Jira to Slack? Okay. All right, so these are, if anybody's interested in solving some of these are a few areas that you can start looking at. Again, this isn't exclusively, there's more that fall outside of this. Problem number 3. There's lots of important events happening in Confluence, and we don't want users missing the key ones. So Kapil's going to talk a lot about the Confluence bidirectional setup, and he'll take it from here because he has that kind of set up in his place.
Sure. So yeah, in our organization, we use Confluence a lot, and it's heavily used across the globe. So people from different regions, they are also using Confluence. And the challenge sometimes we face is like, yeah, Confluence has its own notifications when somebody made some changes, but sometimes the emails, what we receive is like so many emails that we always lose the track of that. So we wanted to address that on a specific event or a specific action, whatever happened in Confluence, we want to get notification in Slack. So that's there were 2 different scenarios, and then one more thing what we use in Confluence is like the team calendar. I'm not sure if anybody use that here, but that's more for like capturing we work in a sprint, so every sprint we go to the team calendar and check the availability of all the engineers and resources. So the team calendar is the one where anybody, when they are going out of the office or working remotely and all such stuff, they update there in team calendar. So we also wanted to set up some way to get notification instantly the moment somebody is updating something that, okay, I'm sick or I'm unable to come today. So we also want such kind of notifications in Slack. So that's how what we use is just the app, which is available in the marketplace, and you can install. You don't have to do much configuration in that. Right now, the scenario which I mentioned here is just simple. Even if you add a comment in a page of Confluence, you get a notification in Slack, which clearly says what is the comment, and you can directly open that page right from Slack. So you don't have to even go to any emails or any other ways. Similarly, you can have you can choose on what actions you need those notifications. So that's really, I mean, that's really helping us, especially for like the team events and the team calendar along with the other entry, because there are some pages, let's say the HR page, that's one of the popular space what we have in our Confluence, and everybody wants to know is like when HR updated some new policy or they have a new notification. So whenever people are like added those notification in the Slack channel specific, and then whenever HR make any changes to those pages, they instantly get notification in Slack. So they never goes like unnoticed. So that's how we do from Confluence to Slack. Yeah, there are other solutions as we discussed in the previous slide as well, that other solution what you can use. Workbot, again, WorkAuto do the same, and they have the bots for that where you can use it. Zapier, pretty same. You can push notifications from Confluence to Slack. The connector is anyways there, and I'm not sure if is anybody there connected Confluence and Slack at the moment. Anybody's using in their org? Okay, so you use the app the same or something else? Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, in a way, it's good. It's like on a different occasion, we really wanted to get notified when the changes are made in Confluence. So that's a pretty good use case. Another problem, yeah. So the Confluence Cloud Connector.
So it's
no, by Atlassian only. Yeah, by Atlassian.
So these are the two different apps that he was using for his solution.
So for email, I'm not sure if people using, but there's an app for in Slack where you can get a dedicated email address for your specific channel, and if anybody sends email to that email ID, it actually sends the message on channel. So that email you can use for anything. It's like one of the scenario is like in our office every week the guest Wi-Fi password change. So what we do is like we get the email the channel where all the employees are added. We have a notification from the IT team when they send any email for guest Wi-Fi, it notifies in the channel. So we don't have to get sending email to like 200 people every morning. So that email app is also, it's free. It's available in Slack. It's not Atlassian app. So within Slack, you can get that and use it. Yes.
That's one of the things we found the hardest about Slack. And basically anything coming out of Atlassian is that there's different teams have different templates for how much they want to be displayed in the channel or whatever their notification app.
Yeah.
And some teams want like a bigger block, but other teams find the bigger block really interrupts the flow of the channel once they consider it out. I haven't seen a convenient way to really change that template of the communication.
Yeah. So I'm in the same boat because I also try to do that. One thing is like these apps, they came into Slack like pretty recent. It's not there since long. So I'm not sure if they're working on building either from Atlassian side or Slack side. But at this moment, I don't see any way to customize once you run those either through slash command or message.
Yeah. So we can talk a little bit about this later in the scenario number 2. I think my group has set up there's a more detailed view of because some people want the details of the Jira ticket in Slack, which like in our cases we just want the subject, who requested it, the ticket number, a URL to the ticket itself, so that we can click on it and quickly access it. But some people want larger pieces of information. So with the plugin that we use, we have the ability to do that. And then also later on, there's a use case that I'll cover where we built our own app to do some other functionality where we've customized that type of thing. So we can talk about that a little bit later, and I can put you in touch with the right people. Okay. So this is the last business problem that we're referring to in the time that we have allotted, and Kapil will also take this one.
Sure. So this is pretty same for Confluence and Slack, but this is the other way. So one problem what we face is like my team is responsible for like the support and being always available on Slack. We always get direct messages from the users on different things. And what we did is like we have an knowledge base in Confluence where we have different pages for each problem, but it's always difficult for users to go into Confluence, search there. They find it easier to direct message someone and try to find that information. So to address that problem, again, we use the same connector. And what we did is like we set up / command for Confluence. And that's the best part is like you can be in Slack, but you can search your entire Confluence and you can get the search result back in Slack. So you don't have to leave Slack for anything. You search it, you get the links, and that's how we'll show it right next. So this I'm in Slack, and all we have to do is like run the / command for the search in Confluence. I just say what is Confluence. It gives me the number of results that you see. We'll see again, and it gives like more link if there are more results. You can always see show more results. These are all the links from Confluence. You can either directly right click and copy and send it to user that, okay, please refer this page, or you can just open and you can check at the same time. So this is like, it's very helpful for us because without leaving Slack, we can search our Confluence right in Slack. So for support team, it's always easy. Even they don't have to leave Slack to find something. They can easily search from here and send the information directly to user within the Slack. So similar to that, yeah, one thing I know again about, there's a workbot specifically for knowledge base by WorkAuto, and that can be used. Zephyr can be used as well. And I think there's no separate plugin in Confluence for that, but yeah, the one which is available from Slack side that does the purpose.
Okay, so those are the 4 scenarios we're going to cover. We're running low on time, and we just want to be respectful of people's time. So maybe we'll open it up to questions for now, and then if time, actually, what I could do is just show. We won't go into the details of this, but these are other business problems that we've solved. There were business problems for us at least, and we built solutions or used apps or things like that to solve them. So. Record decisions from Slack and Confluence. So those of you who use Stride, Stride kind of went down this path of like record. That was like one of the big things that they talked about, right? Decisions, and there's lots of useful information being discussed in Slack. And then you're like, wait, I know somebody talked about that over there, but there's no real mechanism to track the important stuff, right? Like, what are the main things that we're talking about? So there's a solution that Mike built for that. Again, it's a Node.js app in Heroku. Get Slack reminders about Confluence tasks. You already get email reminders about Confluence tasks if you need them, and this is just another medium. For them, it's important. I would probably find this, personally, I would find that I wouldn't find much value out of that. I would find value out of the first one, but not so much the second. And then the third case that we talked about here is a solution that we built. This is a custom solution that we built. We modified some code off of GitHub. There was a bot called JiraBot. It didn't quite work the way we wanted it to, so we forked the code and we modified some of that to make it work the way we wanted it to. So we also called it JiraBot. But what it primarily does is you invite that bot to a channel, and that bot is constantly listening and monitoring for text for Jira-like information. So if you have a project called Help Desk and a ticket, like, all of the Jira projects are something dash project name dash ticket number, right, or issue number. So it's constantly monitoring channel for the things like that, and it'll make calls out to Jira to return information. So that's something that we built over there just to address a specific business problem. So we'll pause here for a second just in case there's any questions that we can answer. If any of these other solutions sound interesting to you, we can talk to you about them offline. So any questions we can answer. Ethan.
So I'm curious on your use case where you take the request that comes in through Slack and you route it over to Jira. What is the experience for the user after that? Are you trying to then route them out of Slack and into Jira now that you have an issue, or is the conversation still carrying on in Slack because that's where they want to be? And are you then missing that context that carries on in Slack that you would probably rather have in Jira?
Yeah. So there's an art to that, right? Because you don't want to stifle conversation in Slack, but you also don't want to be completely distracted. We get so many, hey, do you have a sec? And if you have engineers working and you have a specific average team velocity that you're trying to commit to, and the engineers are answering all sorts of questions from all over the place, right? I want to shield my engineers from that type of stuff. And so, but I don't want them not to have any outward facing touch with users. So there's a specific point in a conversation with somebody when you're like, hey, look, yep, I get what you're saying. This is a legit request. I need to look into it. The team needs to spend some time thinking about it. At the point that happens, we set the expectation that the engineer sends that signal to the user and says, hey, look, we need to take this to Jira. We'll put this in the next sprint, or we'll roll it into this current sprint, and we'll just spend a couple of story points on it. But you signal to that user that we're taking this out of Slack for now. We can't continue to have this conversation. Otherwise, none of the other work that I have is going to get done. So we just don't want to have this unplanned work trump really important planned work already, right? But you have to make a judgment call as the person interacting with the user. If the person has a production issue that's severity 1, you're not going to say, all right, let me create a Jira ticket and I'll deal with it next week, right? Like if the system's down, you're going to address that issue. It's more important than your planned sprint work, right, of those production issues. So I think we trust our staff to make that judgment call and just kind of provide a process to allow them to do that.
Do you have an option wherein people come in on your chat channel, on the Slack channel, and they ask you questions and it looks up into your knowledge base and gives you an answer there?
Like an AI thing? Like
Exactly.
It's monitoring? Yeah. I don't.
Because we do have that in the service desk, and this is something that I was always looking for, that I don't want to be the person to give you the answer, to look up and give you. The service desk does that. When someone starts typing, it automatically looks up and suggests them the articles. So I was just checking if anyone has an equivalent solution working in Slack.
So one thing is, like as mentioned, search, which is like more manual thing. So it's not exactly what you asked. But I know one solution, which is pretty much done like a AI, which tries to sense the question and try to answer. And that's, again, the work auto solution. For the knowledge base, that's pretty much does the same. So I think solution is there. I think Adam may be able to talk if you need that. So it is there.
So just go to Adam, write him a check, and he'll give you everything you need for Adam.
There's a couple of app vendors working on this as well. I don't have everyone's name top of mind, but one is Palha out of Boston. So it's basically a Slack bot they put in that can then query Confluence and start to produce answers like a knowledge base. There's another one based out of California somewhere. I can try to follow up with the names.
Cool. Also, I'm just always have this one more follow-up question. Is there a way that you can interact when you're talking with your end users and they're asking for some help and you want to do a screen share? Instead of screen share, you want to do it like out there on the Slack channel, like right there, which could also be, again, could be a knowledge base article eventually. Is there some kind of utility for that kind of functionality?
To screen share and chat in Slack?
Yeah.
It's built in.
No, what I'm saying is, like, imagine a user complains that I don't know how to link a Jira ticket to another Jira ticket.
Right.
So now I'm like, okay, fine, I'll show it to you. But next time I just want to basically get it recorded so that I can reuse this if someone else comes asking for
Oh, so like a screen capture recording you then store in your knowledge base?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, we just showed you GIFs for this presentation, right? Like, so we end up utilizing some of that quite a bit. Similar to Kapil, we use Confluence as our knowledge base, and wherever possible, we don't have AI built in where we'll automatically respond to users, but our staff are told, look, spend time investing in documentation, and wherever possible, give them a link and point the users to the documentation. So if somebody's asking, hey, how do I do this thing? And we know we've solved that problem and documented it before, we want to point them to the documentation rather than having a conversation with them in Slack and saying, do this and do this and do this. So, and we take a look at the stats, like we have views on our documents to see which ones are getting useful, like a high number of views and stuff like that, to figure out like, hey, maybe maybe let's not invest too much time in this area over here because people aren't really benefiting from the documentation as much.
Okay. No, I don't have anything.
Yeah, I mean, one more that I have.
I think there's a max of 2 questions.
Come on. One discount for the leader. This is something that I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this site called Let Me Google That For You. Are you guys? Okay. I was looking if anyone has thought or built a utility like Let Me Confluence That For You or Let Me Wiki That For You. Because I have people who come and ask me the same thing and I'm like, dude, I copy paste the link. I want to rather give them that link so that it's, in a way, it's like to shame them and to make them search there first before you come and ask me. So it's off topic, but if anyone has built it, it would be cool.
All right. I think we have one more question here from it.
So I understand that going over to Slack, it's only going to be cloud-based, right? There's no cloud end server from HipChat. Has there been some pushback on that? And then I also read a link about this company Rocket Chat. Is that going to be a company that's going to help? Like I've never even done much research on them. Like, do you have any background on that company and how,
Yeah, I can speak just from personal experience. So when we were contemplating, we were HipChat users previously, like many years, 3-4 years back. And we had problems with, we were HipChat cloud users. We had problems with their performance. We were concerned about it. There was a lot of downtime. They were going through like growing pains and we just couldn't work with them through those growing pains. So we looked at alternative tools and Rocket Chat was one of those tools that we considered. Slack was the tool that we ended up choosing. We didn't have a problem using a cloud solution, but I know that we're not tied into the same like constrictions or limitations as many other companies out there that are dealing with. I think we should ask the audience that, like, for those that are tied to those types of like policies, and I'm sure Sean could probably also talk to you about those types of things, but.
So we have a bunch of clients who are looking at this problem because they have HipChat server. What we discovered was that Slack is a kind of an interesting company. They do have what's generally considered to be cloud, but I think they have kind of a premium product, and they have a lot of security built into it, and they have successfully, beaten down security departments and won them over in the end. But you need to find a way to engage with the Slack corporate team. Now, what we discovered was that Atlassian corporately has good leverage with Slack, but Slack tend to be a little non-responsive when it comes to just trying to get something from them because they're so busy. It's not because they don't want to be. It's just they're crazy busy. So what we did was we said to Atlassian, our partner manager, we've got this client, they got a problem. Can you engage the Slack people? And it was really good. Like we got a phone call from the account manager within about 2 hours. So basically, that's kind of that's the thing that a partner can probably help you with.
And it also depends on what tier you are in Slack and like how much you're willing to pay. I think if you're on the top, what is it called, the enterprise grid or not enterprise? Yeah. Yeah, then you're going to get like a white glove service with them. I'm not on that service. I will say just slightly. So I think maybe if you're dealing with like product development with Slack, they might be not as responsive in like dealing with like getting past these hurdles, but their customer service is phenomenal. Whenever I submit Slack feedback tickets, it's not just the speed at which I get responses from them, but the making a connection to me as a customer and joking and just personality of those individuals. They make you feel like a really important and valued customer, and they follow up like when something is not, they don't have functionality for it, or it's a bug that they know about, you can request to be notified when something like that happens, and they have some sort of mechanism of flagging it, and they've followed up with me on that. We are on the plan, we're on Plus Plan, and we're supposed to get 99.99 SLA, and when they have outages, we're supposed to get reimbursements for those outages. When they first started rolling this out, they didn't notify me about those reimbursements. Like I needed to follow up with them, and so I said, hey, look, I'm paying Plus Plan prices here, and I've paid specifically for the 99.99 SLA, I need to be notified. I shouldn't be following up with you. You should be following up with me and saying, look, I'm sorry you didn't get 99.99 SLA. Here's your money back, right? They took that feedback seriously, and now I don't have to follow up with them. Yeah. I used to have a Confluence page that I kept track of the outages and like whether I got reimbursed or not, like at a company level. I don't have to deal with that anymore because I get those notifications to look at this status page. So I think from a product development perspective, maybe they're blowing up. There's a lot going on, but I think from a customer service perspective, they've done a really great job. Okay. If there's any other questions, come grab Kapil and myself. Again, we'll post these online, and we'll talk. There's a couple of other use cases that we have. We've built a karma bot. Slack doesn't have a good karma tool. And coming from HipChat, we missed karma, so it's small stuff like that. So we built a karma bot. We also built an incident bot. So when a production level incident happens, we use a / command to generate a Google Doc for a BPM. We pull together incident managers into a room. We create a Slack channel for people to swarm an issue. And we get a whole incident management process set up by a / incident command. And we have a bot running for that. So come talk to us if you have any questions. And share your experiences with us. Like if you have things like this that other people could learn about, we'll work with you to like help give you a kick-ass presentation and we want you to share that information with others. So, okay, cool. So we're just going to do a quick switch over so that Miles can get set up, and then we'll get rolling into the second presentation.
Chris, it's time to. So as I'm not sure, Marlon earlier mentioned that we believe in rewarding our user members who take their time out to present.
Yeah, so the other thing is not only do we give you guys one of these if you stop and give a talk, but we'll actually help you make the talk itself. So if you need help putting it together, writing it, doing design, we'll help you with all of that leading up into it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then you guys gotta like pass this across, I guess. Yeah, I don't know how it smells better. Hopefully. Yeah. Thank you. I can hold on to it if you want.
I have a hoodie for him, so hold on. Thank you.
Good job, man. Thank you.
Testing.
All right, we're going to get started with the second presentation. So grab your beer, grab your seat, and we'll have Miles run us through this planning stuff.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us. It's great to come to New York City. This is part of a roadshow that we've been doing right across Canada and the US. We've hit multiple cities with this roadshow. It's been very interesting to gauge the reaction of lots of different folks to the ideas that we're presenting here. And we basically called this whole approach Plan Together. And that's bringing different groups of people and enterprises more together in terms of their planning approach and styles. So what we're going to cover off here is an introduction quickly to ourselves, some game plan rules. We're going to talk about planning tribes, what this means, planning bias, some research you can use. We're going to talk about the third-party planning apps specifically that are available to you. We're going to zero in on big picture. We're going to talk a little bit of tempo budgets. We will be doing a short demo, but I'm going to mostly focus on features, and then we'll do a wrap. Okay. We do have a little competition, all right? This is your email address. Send an email to draw@bd4p.com. We would prefer it if you sent us your business email, because we do want to have a relationship with yourself and your company. Please type in your full name and title, and in return, we will send you automatically a PDF of white papers and so forth, and we'll also put you in a draw right away. First person who sends the email in is guaranteed to get a prize. I think we've got three bottles of Great Aussie Red from where I'm from in Sydney, and a number of bits and pieces here, including some speakers, Bluetooth speakers. I've put in various slides the email address just as a bit of a reminder to you. So a little bit about us. Headquartered in Toronto, we have offices in St. Louis and Philadelphia. We are the largest Canadian platinum partner, but we're very fast growing in the US. I really want to zero in on what we believe to be one of our differentiators, and that's objectivity. So we don't build any apps. We're a pure consulting shop. We'll look after your licenses. And one of our core competencies is doing assessments, head-to-head evaluations in different segments of the third-party apps. I've just finished actually a white paper on the testing space. It's kind of interesting, head-to-head between testing for Jira, Zephyr, and X-Ray. So if you're interested in that, you can just go to our website and download it. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about planning. Why planning, you might ask? Well, obviously Agile involves planning, but there's a lot of planning that goes on in enterprises that's beyond where Jira typically plays. And I think it's important for us to understand why Jira isn't being used by planners and the rest of enterprises, and how we can go about trying to encourage people to get into it. If you're in the Agile world, you'll probably know that there's often different views about how to do planning. And I think sometimes we forget that the objective is more important than the way we get there. I've just recently flown in from Washington, where we sponsored the PMI Leaders Conference. About 750 or 800 directors and PMO VPs were at this conference. And what we were about there was basically saying, you know, all these different tools that are being used in enterprises for planning are really not contributing to one cohesive view. And I got a ton of fantastic feedback about that. There's no question that portfolio planning tools such as Clarity and others, PlanView, are stealing the budget from everybody else. And I think that there's certainly a better way to go about doing that planning. So let's talk a little bit about the planning tribes as we see them, okay? First of all, we have the developer tribe. I'm sure you guys are pretty familiar with the developer tribe. You know, developers have a distinct sort of style about how they work. They like to get things done quickly. They like low overhead. They don't really like to do long documentation. They love their wiki. They like to get the documentation in there quickly. But filling out 100 reports isn't the sort of thing that developers like to do. Actually, and they're also kind of a bit idiosyncratic, right? And in fact, the perception from the rest of the organization about Agile especially, is that it's really just a kind of off-the-cuff, kind of loosey-goosey sort of thing that we do, when we're building our projects. But in fact, that's really far from the case when you look at all the reports. So let's now talk about the project planning tribe. The project planning tribe, very organized, very disciplined, like their Microsoft project plans. They do their status reports. It's a very sort of, it's a very different kind of a world. And oftentimes project managers are basically, helicoptered in to try to bring order to what's perceived to be the chaos from senior management. But we should also remember that there's been some incredible advances and disciplines in the project management world, such as the PMP, which is a pretty horrible test. I don't know whether anybody here has had to miss poor favor to do it. And of course, what's central to the project planning world is the triple constraint of cost, scope, and time. Okay, so now let's talk about the corporate planning tribe, okay? This is often thought of as the the way that people look at corporate planners. Basically just tell us your estimates and we'll treat them as fixed. But of course, what this is really all about is cost. And so probably over the last 10 to 15 years, these enterprise portfolio planning systems have been implemented to manage resources and to make sure people are working on projects, that they're legitimate budgets, and so on and so forth. But this has also caused a plethora of further reports. So now people are in Jira, they've got project managers building project plans in Microsoft Project. We've got status reports in these corporate planning systems. We've got reporting going on the same thing everywhere in multiple systems in a lot of companies. And certainly that's the case in many of the large enterprises that we consult with. And it was basically universally acknowledged to be true at this conference that I was just at. So I'm not sure all of you guys can see that, but you've probably got screens up here. But essentially the way we see this is that there's really tribal bias in planning, okay? When you look at these three different worlds, they bring different considerations that are somewhat akin to their stakeholder interest. I think with development teams, it's all about time and speed. And that's really what Agile brings to the table. On the traditional project management side, a lot of it's to do with scope. And certainly at the portfolio level, a lot of it is to do with cost. But I think that what happens is that the truth is suffering from this because basically we're not really able to understand what's actually going on. We just have the different lenses of these different systems telling us exactly what is happening. So let's talk quickly about some numbers. Why build on Atlassian? We did a piece of research on the Atlassian landscape to try to understand the true situation with regard to Jira with the SDLC and Agile. I'll just take you through this a little bit. So you've all heard of the Gartner Magic Quadrant, right? It's sort of pretty well common in the industry. Well, one thing people don't realize about the Gartner Magic Quadrant is that it doesn't take into account market share. You just have to sell $10 million worth of software, and by magic, you end up in the quadrant. So really all it does is it tells you, whether Gartner thinks you're a visionary or whether you're, you offer an excellent product. Version 1 produces a fantastic market share report, which I really do recommend you take a look at. And it rates all of the Agile tools in terms of market share. So what we did was we took the version 1, which is a competitor to Atlassian, and as one axis, and the Gartner ranking is another. And we discovered, most interestingly, that Atlassian has twice the size, twice the market share of its nearest competitor, which is really quite astonishing. So what that tells us, and Atlassian will tell that to you, is that very large numbers of people use Atlassian. It's an astonishingly hugely used product. So it forms a foundation for planning together. And I'll explain to you that in a sec. Atlassian also did some research on how companies use Agile. And it's kind of interesting. So this research report was done by them. And what you'll see is most companies mix Agile and non-Agile techniques. They even will say they mix Agile methodologies. So really very few, only 1 in 5 companies adhere to one specific planning style in Agile. But what this basically means is that you are dealing in IT, most likely, with a plethora of approaches to planning. And the real question becomes, how well does Jira and Confluence and the tools support that? The other thing to remember too is that IT is not the only place that planning takes place in companies, right? It's in marketing, in legal, HR, manufacturing, procurement, they're all planning away as well. And often those plans have to intersect with IT development as well. You know, you're not going to use Scrum to plan an event, right? So how well is the Atlassian stack able to say you know, Atlassian talks about supporting every team, right? You've heard that. How many people have heard that latest mantra? Quite a lot, right? Except, I don't know, only if you extend the product with a whole bunch of add-ons. So, and of course, you know, an iconic building like this was not iterative, right? Same with, you know, how food is produced. That's typically Kanban. So basically, there's a big enterprise disconnect that's going on. It's pretty well the case that Microsoft Project is being used, you know, by most business folk at the executional level. Atlassian dominates the executional piece when it comes to IT. But in the planning stage, the aggregation of this, we really are dealing with expensive, cumbersome ERP systems like PlanView, Clarity. There's about 4 or 5 of them. And then at the executive management level, all they want to see is a bunch of PowerPoints cobbled together from these various systems. But the truth really is built from the ground up, okay? It really is the case that any portfolio system worth its salt is feeding from, you know, data that's real time, on the ground, aggregated, and not some abstraction from all these different tools and systems. And the way we think that should be done is that basically the projects on the ground, including the waterfall projects, should really take advantage of the native features, you know, that Jira has, right? It basically doesn't care. It runs filters across projects. So filters and dashboards across all these projects can feed these things called plans, which we'll talk about in a second, and budgets. So essentially, all the things that you need to have a world-class portfolio management system already exist. They're less expensive by about a 50th, but they're not really being adopted by many corporations. So as part of this journey then, we thought, let's take a look at the third-party planning apps that would pretend to be a real planning app. So we looked at Structure Gantt, Portfolio, WBS Gantt, and Big Picture. We have elected to go down the big picture road. You can see that the number of downloads, which is something you should always look at when you're thinking about an app, is over 5,000 active instances. So these guys are serious. They are the market leaders by quite a long way. And really the runoff in terms of features and functionality was between Portfolio and Big Picture. So I just want to talk about Portfolio a bit. I want to ask my Atlassian friend over here to shut his ears, not listen to anything I say. So we're not big fans of Portfolio. The user interface isn't great, I don't think. I don't know what other people's views are of that. But the one glaring kind of problem with Portfolio is the single hierarchical configuration. So if you're a planner, if you want to support planning, you have to be able to have a flexible work breakdown structure, WBS. That's the name of the game in planning, amongst a number of other features, such as baselining and critical path and all the usual suspects. You got to be able to say, look, this project has this work breakdown structure, And that project has this work breakdown structure. And I got to be able to indent and outdent whenever I want. And that just isn't something natively that Jira does very well at all. In fact, the only hierarchy natively in Jira is basically epic, story and subtask, and that's it. So you've got to find a way to tackle this. Now, what you're looking at here is the global configuration snapshot, where in this case, we have initiative, feature, epic, story, and subtask. And you can change this. You can add levels, but every level in this hierarchy has to be an issue type, right? And if you do configure it one way, and then say later on, decide you don't like that configuration and you want to insert something in the middle, all the children in all the plans are lost. So you break every plan. So what Atlassian isn't, even Atlassian's official advice is, yes, if you use Portfolio, whatever you do, don't change the hierarchy in the middle. Change it at either at the bottom or the top, okay? And that just isn't feasible. And what's more, it's not feasible to say one division. For all divisions in a company, you have to stick with the same work breakdown structure, the same hierarchical model. It just will not work at scale. If you have a very tight company, like 100 people, and you've all agreed this is the way we're going to do it, and only this way, then it's okay. So Portfolio has this problem. We have, said to Atlassian many times, if they can fix that and maybe sort the interface out a bit, we would be back on board. You probably heard recently about a cloud feature that's just been introduced. It's a bit of a news flash. They've introduced this thing called roadmaps, right? So it's very interesting that it's at the opposite end of the spectrum of Portfolio in terms of sort of acknowledging that, yes, planning is important. It's very fixed at the epic level. It's a nice, simple planning tool. You can drag and drop for elapsed time. It's kind of like the complete opposite of Portfolio. I definitely think it's heading in the right direction, but it's still too limited for a serious planner. So we'll talk a little bit about, the demo. I'm just going to do a quick demo, and then I'm going to get back to slides because it's just too time consuming. I'll run out of time if I try and do the full demo. We're going to talk about what a plan is. We're going to configure a plan. We're going to talk about what real-time status reporting looks like in it, some resource management, and then some budgets. So just before I get into the configuration side, the basic demo that Big Picture has is called Rescue the Princess, and it's kind of humorous. And it's just a Gantt chart that shows, somebody trying to rescue the princess, get to the castle, find the map, marry the princess, fight the minions, this kind of thing. And it's very simple. And you can see across the interface that you have all of the tools that you would expect to see in a planning application. And so what immediately strikes you is this looks a little bit like Microsoft Project, right? And so that's kind of half the battle. If you can provide something that all the planners in your organization are completely familiar with, you'll get much faster buy-in from them to want to participate in this system, rather than saying to them, yeah, we want you to do all your waterfall, all your planning, all your business planning in this tool, and you have the choice of a Kanban board or a Scrum board, right? They'll go, right, well, I don't, that doesn't work for me. I need a timeline. So that's the first thing here. And you can see that it has, the usual features of dependencies, and you can drag and drop these dependencies. It's kind of cool. So I'm just going to drop out of here for a sec and take us over to Big Picture. Okay, so this is the server version, and you can see here that I've got kind of a whole bunch of add-ons here, and this is Big Picture here. And I can select my program. When you see program in Big Picture, think project. Well, actually think plan. And you can see here's the program manager, which is just the list of all the plans. And the way that I get around this is I can just, highlight something. I can then indent, outdent, all the traditional planning approaches. And you'll see down below here also that at the same time I have resource contention. So you can see that poor Mello, or is it Rodolfo? Mello's been given 12 hours worth of work to do on this day, and it flashes red. So it really does have all that kind of look and feel of a planning solution. And what's also very interesting about this, and we'll get back to this in the slides, is that when you create a plan, all the critical objects from the Jira projects will find their way into the plan. So this, for instance, is a real release. And it knows that in this release, there are a series of web sprints part of it. Okay, so let's just go back to the slides. I wanted to prove also that I did know how to navigate around this and I wasn't just a slide junkie, okay? I've done this demo now about, I don't know, 100 times in the last 3 days. So, yeah. Okay, so let's go to here. Okay, so that dashboard that you're looking at here, there's a little wheel when you're looking at the plan. You click on the wheel and you, the planner, have control over the way that you want to have your plan set up, synchronized with a Jira project. So what this product does, and also what Portfolio does, is introduce the concept of the plan as a kind of an entity in Jira. Think of it as another place, like a board that you can start to work with. And depending on the add-on, there are various amounts of things that you can do in the plan that will or will not affect what's going on in the subsidiary Jira projects. The key to this, though, is that a plan can have really any combination of things in it from Jira. It can have projects, it can have filters, it can have boards. And so what this means is that by simply implementing this add-on, you are able to scale Agile, right? You're able to scale Agile for one very simple reason. You can take every one of those Agile projects, which are operating, hopefully, as effectively as possible, charging along with their velocity, and so on and so forth, and you're able to drop them into a plan, and then you can add another task, which just says, all my Agile projects, and you can see at that level, when do all those Agile projects finish, right? So it's kind of a powerful, very powerful, quick win. So without having to do anything to those Agile projects, I can now see each one of these at a parental level, and I can start messing around with the work breakdown structure too. I could take some of the releases and I could put them outside of their projects that they're in right now, which is very important, for instance, for, say, how a business might view the different subsidiary releases for a platform. So it's quite important that you can do that. As I mentioned, unlike a Microsoft project plan, and this is something that you can really hopefully sell your project managers on, a Microsoft project plan will just have tasks, right, and activities. Really, these plans will take every kind of object into them that you want. In the synchronization tab, you can basically specify whether I want releases. Do I really want the backlog? Probably not. I could probably exclude the backlog from my plan. Or I could decide that I don't need to see these sprints. I kid you not, we have a client that we were doing a large kind of SDLC setup for. We were implementing Jira for them. They had about 200 developers. And the project manager that I was, one of the project managers I was working with, was literally sitting there making a Microsoft project plan and transcribing the sprints from Jira to the plan, right? So that he could represent to the business when it all would finish. And I was just scratching my head and I just couldn't believe it. I said, haven't you figured out that you've got this burn down chart, release burn down chart, and it'll tell you and all that sort of stuff? He said, yeah, Miles, I don't understand that. We've got to give them a plan. So this kind of like chronic, duplication of work is certainly going on in many enterprises today. And I wouldn't be surprised if you kind of went around your own organization and found some of that going on. One of the things that I actually really love about this tool is the real-time status reporting. And because I know you all know Jira pretty well, I should be able to explain this sort of relatively quickly. So what you have in your dashboard is another setting called perspectives for your plan. Basically what perspectives is that section, before you get to the Gantt chart that starts to provide you with information about the tasks underneath it. Well, in this view, you can select any custom field in Jira as a way to look at the status of an item. So all that fantastic stuff you've been doing, all those custom fields you've been setting up, the admins have been saying, no, don't add more custom fields, but you did it anyway. You can see that status rolled up. And I'll just explain a little bit more how that works. So here, when you click on the dial, it'll allow you to say how you want the roll-up to take place. So basically, in this case, it's some no parent. Story points could be some no parent. Status is very cool. So what status does is it allows you to see underneath any parent the sum total by status type of each of the items underneath. So for instance, if I wanted to understand in a project how I was doing, one of the things I'd probably want to know is, well, there were 200 things, 200 stories, 200 use cases, 200 whatevers that are being done. I could see that 100 have started, 50 haven't started, 40 are in QA, and 30 have been done. And at a glance, I can see that using this approach. And when I change the WBS, it recalculates. So if I add something else as a parent, I can see how that roll-up works. So that's kind of cool. The other thing that's kind of interesting about Big Picture too is they've done a deal with Tempo. So if you're Tempo users, Tempo teams and Big Picture are coordinated. And I should just mention that Portfolio has its own definition of team, which isn't a Tempo definition of team. So we kind of like this evolution towards teams that's taking place with this planning tool and the Tempo planning tool. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention to you is I'll just explain quickly how the whole team thing works. So you'll see across the top here when you're configuring your global teams, these plans. So what you're essentially doing here is you take your Jira users, you put them into a team, and then you have a team name. And then what you can do is you can say, for this team, what is their workload plan? Do they work Saturdays? What hours do they generally work? That's in here. Holiday plans, same. What skills this team has. Story point velocity allows you to translate, on average, for that team, sort of points to hours or days or weeks. That's kind of cool because if you're working in an agile environment and you want to know what hit you're going to take if you lose staff, then it can figure out that this many points is going to overload the team based on that calculation. And you can change that equation per team because some teams may have more story points and have a different scope as per agile best practices versus say another team that might have a different set of points. And as you can see here, this is the Tempo integration point. We would like to see a little bit auto magical integration right now. It's not, it's a little bit more of a manual integration point, but I'm sure they'll sort that out going forward. Okay, so we talked about the idea that now we can scale everything from a planning perspective. We can give project managers a more a view of the activity going on in Jira that makes more sense to them. And indeed, I believe that there's nothing wrong with providing overall project plans that include those agile teams. Let's talk a little bit about a strategy to really nail down that total portfolio. So when we configure a Jira for project teams, we want to see the RAID log, not in an Excel spreadsheet. We want to see the RAID log, in Jira. So we can have a standard templates for all of these items, but we also have one for projects. About 4 summits ago, Scott and Mike sat down in a fireside chat. Well, it was one of them. I can't remember whether both of them. And they talked about how they run their portfolio in Jira. And they have a project record for every project that they have in their organization. And we think that's a smart play too. The reason for this too is that if I try to load all of the Jira tickets into a plan, it's going to blow up, right? I mean, we did a 500-line plan in Big Picture for a client, and that was kind of starting to stretch it a bit. So you don't really want to have like every single thing, including all backlog in your plans. You want to be a bit more selective. But the way to tackle this is to create a project issue type called project. And in fact, the workflow for that project can be whatever the life cycle or stages of approval that a general project would go through. And you can see we've got traffic lights. I like traffic lights. Project managers need traffic lights. It's a cool little add-on. All it does is take red and you click red and it goes red. That kind of thing. You could have your budgets. You could have your stages. This is a custom field that takes you to the project to which the record addresses, right? So I can have that custom field set up to go to the very project that it's referring to, right? So I'm all set there. You could even set up a service desk so that when somebody requests a project, you create the project record at the time of initiation, right? And then the cool thing is, if you've got the project records, stick them back in the plan, right? So now these are all projects. They're not tasks or anything else. And I can see the status of these projects. I can do all my add-ups, everything that I did. I can see my plan, and I can see where I'm at with them. And you just assign an owner to each of those project records, whoever owns the project, and you say, your responsibility is to update this once a week and to make sure that it's all working like that. So that gives you a total project view. Let's talk a little bit about numbers. So tempo, we go from tempo basic timesheets, which we love. We kind of skip their planner product because we think the big picture's a better planner product. And then we go straight to budgets, which we really love. And basically budgets gives real zing to your portfolio. What it does is it provides all of the value management, which I hate, and all that sort of stuff, to your total portfolio view. So you can see across your portfolio how it's doing, whether it's on budget, whether it's head of plan, that kind of thing. The way it works is that it provides, it enables you to have a rates table. So basically, all those people that were putting in time in tempo, that's turning into dollars and cents, because you can say, this is how much this person costs, if you want, or this is how much I'm billing them for. And there's the rate table, and you've got all sorts of crazy reporting, that kind of thing. So let's do a quick summarize on tips and tricks then to get it working. You got to socialize this with PMs. You need to show them that traditional planning can be supported in Jira. It isn't just a tool for agile guys, Scrum guys, service desk guys. It can support all the tribes. And I think it's a very important battle to win, because if you win that battle, you'll bring people together. You'll have a more consistent status reporting solution, and you'll definitely, save a huge amount of effort. Roll the plans up into just what you need. Don't take everything. Like if you're doing agile, overall scaled agile, just ignore the backlog. Maybe just bring the releases in. If they're properly bookended, those versions and releases should represent the appropriate metrics for where the project's at. You really want to know where are these releases heading and when, so that when those releases change, you have an overall view of your roadmap. Use project records to ensure program hierarchies, like we showed you. Allow teams to use native agile, and at the same time create hierarchical planning views as needed. So I am not here saying change anything that agile teams are doing. Best practices stays in the team. That's what we want them to do. We don't want them to change, but we can build a plan around them, and we don't have to tell them too much about that, right? Other than understand kind of how it all hangs together. So as I say here, there's nothing wrong with using traditional planning to understand multiple agile projects. I actually think it's a more flexible way to scale agile than, say, a SAFe, which is very top-down and very heavy in terms of change. Configurable hierarchies are very important for all teams. You've got to enable them the ability to have those WBSs, and so basically enable different tribes to play in one sandbox. So really what we've done now is if we've touched on everything here, right? We've got a real-time planning system with best practices all happening here, right? And we've got filters and dashboards, which we can use whenever we need them. We've got budgets and we've got plans. So we have now a world-class portfolio system, which is better than any product in the market right now, which is costing probably over $1 million in some cases for customers. So you know, another thing that obviously makes it fantastic is that it really does allow us to do top-down and bottom-up planning. I can see everything rippling up, and I can say, these are my objectives, and I can see whether realistically our teams and so forth are actually going to achieve those. So that's great. Keep calm and plan together. Thanks. Any questions? Yes. Well, so big picture has recently gone on to cloud. Like 12 months ago, 12 months, 15 months ago, it wasn't on cloud. It's not as bad as you think. Like, I think it's about 70 or 75%. I've done demos of big picture on cloud. They're moving very fast. They're very focused. Budgets, unfortunately, doesn't exist on cloud. They're introducing a slimmed down something. So if you're on cloud, we probably can't cater right now to a full portfolio system. You could probably do a bit of a kludgy job with Easy BI and just have dollar fields and have Easy BI do some additions. That would be a bit of a workaround on cloud. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you've got a lot of horsepower there, you know, just no budgets, I'm afraid. How many people agree that they've probably got project managers sneaking around building project plans in parallel to agile teams? Any takers? Yeah. I mean, it's a problem, right? And it's because they just don't understand this Jira thing. It's not. They're much happier in their Microsoft project, and it's really hard to get them off. Like, I mean, I would say too, don't try to do a full head-to-head with an MS project guy. It's a mature product. It's been around for about 20 years. You're not going to get every feature. Like, we had a fight with a consultancy over negative lag. I don't know whether anybody has heard of negative lag, but it's an evil thing. And you know, big picture can't do negative lag on the dependency side. But so what? The power of having a plan that all people are participating in real time and updating versus a Microsoft project plan that sits in a SharePoint folder, which gets updated once a week by 100 people on the phone. It's incredible, right? The productivity improvements that you can get from it. So you're a quiet bunch tonight. I think you all want to go home or have a beer.
Any other questions?
Do we have a winner? Okay. We got three bottles to give away though, Josh. Yeah. I will just give it to somebody anyway. So, all right. Well, thanks very much, everybody, and just come up and ask any questions you have.
Thank you, Miles. If you could just stop sharing. Oh, right. Thanks. I was told.